This room is my study, throbbing creative heart of the house. I write most of my novels here, and it contains an odd mixture of books, probably 1/6 of the books that are in the house. A major book storage problem. This study contains a lot of the books that I used to research my various novels. I mean, I can find anything in about 2 minutes. I've got an incredible memory, and I think most people who have lots of books sort of know where they are and very rarely caught out. This is a pamphlet of poems by Philip Larkin, published in 1951, 20 poems, privately printed when he was a librarian in Belfast. He hadn't published a book of poetry by this time. A lot of these poems went into his first book, The North Ship. He only wrote 4 books of poetry, Larkin, very costive, slow-writing poet. And I think there are only a few dozen copies in existence of this, so it's possibly the rarest book of poems I have. It was also far and away the most expensive. Here's an example of a little book I bought, The Composer's Vade Mecum. Gives you an explanation of all the musical terms, basso, ostinato, impetuoso, etc. Like a little mini dictionary for musicians. Here's another little one. It's called the Thumb Dictionary, published in 1900. It's absolutely minute print, but because my novel is set in 1895, I worried about anachronisms, and so if you can't find the word in here, then it probably wasn't in use in 1895. Again, a beautiful little thing. It cost £5 or something like that. Well, this is the kind of sitting room, the biggest room in the house. What have I got up here? There's some Kilvert's diary, Pepys's diaries. I mean, he only kept it for 10 years, but it's a massive piece of work. Edmund Wilson, he wrote diaries all his life. You've got the 20s, 30s, 40s, 50s, 60s. Kind of cantankerous man, sort of complex and bitter, but they're very honest. That's him as a young man, friend of Scott Fitzgerald and Ernest Hemingway, and probably the leading literary critic of his generation. These journals are phenomenally honest, and they detail his many love affairs with complete and utter explicit candor. That's what journals give you, I think, that access to the individual mind, unfiltered and unshaped. And so, Wilson, complicated man, he hated the English, interestingly. I'm a great lover of Evelyn Waugh. I've read everything Waugh's written, I think, every word, and I'm fascinated by him as a man as well as a writer. And this is a copy of his most famous novel, Brideshead Revisited. Not the first edition, I have got the first edition, but this was an edition that was a uniform edition that came out, because he wasn't very happy with the first version of Brideshead. He thought it was a bit over the top. He's actually dedicated this novel to the man who was a friend who wrote the first biography of him, Christopher Sykes, from whom every character in this romance was assiduously drawn by his affectionate friend Evelyn Waugh. But it's funny to think of him, sitting down in his library in his stately home and writing this out for his chum. There are 2 writers I've read recently who I was massively struck by, young writers. One is a young woman called Evie Wilde, which is called All the Birds Singing. Is one of the most technically accomplished novels I've read, but she came up with an amazing structure for her novel, and it's very powerful. And the other novel which I read last year, a young writer called David Shalhoub. Here we are, yeah. I mean, that is a fluke. He wrote a novel called All That Man Is. In a way, it's like 9 stories covering, if you like, all the ages of man, but in Europe. So you get, a bodyguard to a Croatian prostitute, or you get some dodgy architect in the Balearics or something. That he ranges through Europe, and he picks certain examples of European men. It's very funny, but it's also incredibly accurate. So they're 2 young writers who, I'll be going straight for their next books.
How many books do you think you own?
I think it must be over 10,000. You can't chuck books out even if you don't want them, so they sort of pile up as well. It's a massive problem. But you know, as somebody said, well, if I have to spend, you know, another, you know, 10,000 years in limbo because I bought too many books in my life, then I'm prepared to put up with it.